Hi, today I'm here with Amber Ferrenbecker. Amber is the marketing director at Flowcast. She's a startup marketing expert and a B2B marketing expert. Amber, thank you so much for being with me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Caroline. I appreciate it. I yeah, everything that you said, I've kind of fallen into this place where I just do early stage startup marketing, and at this point, I think I'm on my third one, so I can't say that it's kind of my thing. So here we are.
Great. So today we are going to talk about building a messaging that is really user centric. And a lot of the times, it's difficult to do this when you're in a startup environment because you don't necessarily have access to customers. You don't necessarily have access to a lot of data. You can't hire a huge, marketing survey agency that is going to get this data for you. And yet you need to build a messaging that is really going to resonate with your audience. So, with that, I'd love to get your take on how you go about this to really build powerful messaging that resonates with users.
Yeah, I mean, when you're first starting, you gotta start somewhere. And I've kind of come in and kind of getting my footing with my new role with Flowcast. It's I'm 2 months in, and it's always a bit different, either whether or not they've raised the same amount of money, or it's kind of like it just depends. Team size is always relatively small, but there's always different, facets or historical background that you're kind of working through. But in terms of messaging, earlier on, it's really, I think a really great starting point is, first of all, hopefully there's product market fit that you've already identified, that been brought into to actually, to apply to something that's got a sales and as a demand market opportunity, because then it gets very hard for the marketer, because you're just in a place where you're having to do way more work, and in long term, if the product market fit, we all know it's just not gonna, you're gonna evolve out. So as far as like getting started, obviously, like, and quickly, and the urgency is something that I'm definitely no stranger to. But I think a great place is to start with your competitors. See what people are sick of, see what people are really, and go into the places that they're trying not to get you to see or find. And something that I did before was, there was a big telecom provider that was like our giant. They were just a market dominator, and they bought up like one other of the players that was like the top in the space, and then another one. So it was like a monopoly. And so, as you can imagine, customers felt that squeeze very much. And what we were going after was a segment of that business that wasn't the biggest for them, but that was our, you know,
Mhm.
those were our, the reason why we were a company. And so really kind of trying to peel that away and understanding like they were getting ignored. So finding Facebook posts, comments about how they've been like trying to get a hold of somebody before the social media team could go and delete it was something that I started to do just by following, for updates and getting alerts, so it show up in my feed right away. So, and that's not, again, like a scalable thing to do necessarily, but it's just an example of like the thinking. Like, you have to really kind of go be a scout for like what people are saying, and you can't just expect it to come from your Google Analytics is going to tell you nothing in terms of what type of person is sitting behind a desk, or looking at a phone, or out in a field, or struggling with a challenge you're trying to solve for. That you're not going to find that in these like marketer audience insights tools and things like that. It's really about getting a feel for what the person looks like, who they are in aggregate, like is there's any trends you can identify, and then also are there any pain points that seem to be glaringly obvious, so that you can touch on right away. And you can really just go and attack that and use those messages as your own brand messaging to solve for as value props.
Right, right. And I think you're right. It's not necessarily scalable, but I think as marketers, we really need to do everything we can to really understand the market. Um, you mentioned in one of our previous conversations going on forums that people are just interacting on, like, and it's a really great way to interact with the community and understanding what do they care about, right? What keep them up at night, right?
Yeah, totally. That's exactly what it was. It was like, what are they like concerned about? Like, what is such a problem for them that they if you come in and ride in a chariot, like you're their hero because it's such an issue. And it might just be, it should definitely be something, if the research has been done in the right way from a product standpoint, it should be something that's already solving for it, but you just have to connect the dots and find those users. And it's really like people are going to pay and they're going to stay with you forever if you can solve a problem that's keeping them up at night, for example. And even then, I always say that people, they're motivated by two things, and I stand by this. It's like there's no guarantees, but like death and taxes, and like people are motivated by saving money or time. And that's just like what they don't have enough of and what they want more of. And that doesn't change. It just doesn't change. And so, almost any time if you offer somebody, it's an amount of money, obviously it gets more granular past that, but, and then you can play to that and you can start to talk about savings. And like, I always love to preach about the so what rule because a lot with my team and just like, interns or anyone that's, kind of coming up and developing in their career, just to communicate that like, we're not the end user. So whatever you do on your computer, just don't disregard it because it's just not, unless it is exactly who we are, then don't disregard it. But
Right.
out the window because just because you use Chrome, like there's a lot of people that are using like Internet Explorer and they don't even know that because they're not in the internet industry and they don't care. They're worried about other things like running, an industrial business or something that is completely outside of the realm of what what your day looks like as a digital marketer, workforce. So, you have to make those assumptions. And if that is the case, and if like, if it is Internet Explorer, we need to optimize for that. And maybe we should look at Bing as opposed to making assumptions that nobody's on Bing. Like you don't know that. And so that's kind of what, my biggest thing is. And it's all just data-driven approaches and just taking yourself out of it when you're talking about your brand messaging. Because what a lot of brands want to do is they want to talk about themselves. And so users, they see it, they don't care. They just want to know, so what? Like, how does it help me? And if you can apply that to like any copy, I've found over time, it just continues to get better and better and just resonates so much stronger with the audience. And you get them in the door so much easier because you get it and you become their advocate as opposed to somebody that's selling them something.
Exactly. Well, Amber, thank you so much. I think that was really useful and inspiring. So thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for having me. I hope that it was remotely helpful. So it was nice to kind of take a minute to like retro on like what the approach is just with startups and everything. So thank you so much. I
Yeah.
appreciate your time.